Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, I take more of your questions specifically on Russell Wilson and whether or not he can be a key factor in the Steelers finally winning a playoff game for the first time since the 2016-2017 season. That and more of your questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Steelers fans, let's get a few more of your questions in here. And wanted to focus a little bit more on Russell Wilson, specifically because I thought some of these questions were interesting as far as the capabilities of Russell Wilson and what ultimately Steelers fans want to see from Russell Wilson. We go to Todd out in Maryland for our first question, revolving around Wilson finally helping the Steelers get over the playoff hump. Here's Todd.
Hey, Chris, this is Todd from Maryland. First of all, I want to commend you on an excellent show. We listen every day. Chris, my question is, why are people in Pittsburgh calling for a quarterback controversy between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson when it's obvious that Russell Wilson is the far superior quarterback? Russell Wilson's statistics rival Ben Roethlisberger's statistics and may even be better for the first 12 years of his career. And he is a proven winner in this league with playoff wins. If an organization is trying to get back to a point with playoff wins, why would you turn to a quarterback that has none? I thank you so much again for hearing my question and appreciate what you do.
Thank you for your question, Todd. As always, you can call in like Todd did, 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. We'll try to get your question on the show. So, Todd, I agree with you on the sense that Russell Wilson right now is the clear better quarterback as far as pedigree, as far as being well completely put together. I think Justin Fields has a higher ceiling than Russell Wilson, but I don't think he's there yet, which is why I've been maintaining I think the Steelers are right in their making Russell Wilson their QB1. But I want to delve into the point that you brought up about playoffs, because that is the biggest thing the Steelers have been missing as far as playoff performance from the quarterback position. And I've said this for years. The biggest thing the Steelers haven't had in the playoffs is quarterback performance in the right moments. It has been since their 2016-2017 playoff game against the Chiefs that a simple field goal even has been scored by the offense when the game is either tied or within a single possession, because where the team is down by a single possession. It has been since the Dolphins playoff game of that same year that the offense has scored a touchdown when the game is either tied or within a single possession as far as being behind. So you look through all those years, and the thing is that when we talk about quarterback play, a lot of people say, well, Ben Roethlisberger ended up fine in the Browns game. He threw four touchdowns. Well, he also threw 4 interceptions, also had another turnover, and never scored when the game was on the line. Well, he threw 5 touchdowns and 469 yards against the Jaguars. Well, he also played a big role in them getting down 21 points before the offense even got started. And when the defense did get stops, he didn't lead touchdown drives or even field goal drives to at least tie the game or get the game close when the defense was making their stops. And I think that's one of the big things, timeliness of quarterback play, because the same thing applied to Mason Rudolph of this past year. When the Steelers had chances to tie the game or take a lead against Buffalo, it didn't happen. And there were 2 punts and a fumble. And granted, some of those aren't on Mason Rudolph, some of those are also on George Pickens fumbling the ball, but it's a collective problem that we've seen from Steelers quarterback play in playoff games, even when the opportunities present themselves, even when the play is designed, the guys are wide open, quarterbacks just haven't delivered. And so I do think one of the things here that also needs to be looked at when talking about Russell Wilson is he has delivered in the playoffs, at least from a quarterback perspective. He has thrown touchdowns. For example, Ben Roethlisberger in plenty of his games has multiple interceptions, or at least as many interceptions or more interceptions than he had touchdowns in those games. Though, in fact, it was a rare instance when he did against the Chiefs last year. But you go back to their loss against the Browns at 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Their loss against the Patriots, 1 touchdown to 1 interception. Even their win over the Chiefs, 0 touchdowns to 1 interception. It's kind of been more of the thing. It's kind of happens more often when Ben Roethlisberger was around. But with Russell Wilson, it's the opposite. Even in their loss to the Rams last year and the Packers before that, he threw 2 touchdowns to 1 interceptions, 1 to no interceptions, 1 to no interceptions before that. In fact, it's more of a rarity in Russell Wilson's playoff career that he has as many interceptions to touchdowns or more interceptions than touchdowns in his playoff performances. And also, if you do the same mark as far as scoring touchdowns when leading scoring drives when the game is on the line, whether it's within a single possession or tied, he did that as recently as 2021, which is the last time that he was on a team that made the playoffs. And I think that's he did it that year. He did it the year before that. I think one thing that needs to be talked about is Russell Wilson is going to play to the strategy. And if the Steelers I think a lot of this does come back down to Arthur Smith and what he wants and how he leads this offense. But Russell Wilson, I think, isn't a guy that's going to shy away in the moment. And listen, there's plenty of moments where Russell Wilson came up short in big moments, like of course, the interception that he threw in the Super Bowl. But there's also plenty of times where he's delivered in those big moments, and just like Ben Roethlisberger did. But he also, I think, was a little bit more consistent in what he was executing, because it wasn't all about him, and he didn't make it all about himself. He often was more so part of a system that was doing well. And I think that's all the Steelers are going to ask of him. And I think that's kind of what the Steelers need. When you look at his numbers in the playoffs, he has a 95.3 passer rating in playoff games in his career. I think that's important. That's better than Ben Roethlisberger's 86.7 in those years. And again, this is going to be an offense that's actually coordinated by a person with good experience as an offensive coordinator, and Arthur Smith. We'll get to him in a little bit. This is an offense that's going to have a better offensive line than probably it's had in years since the prime days of Pouncey and DeCastro. This is an offense that's going to have a running game that's going to make it easy, and it's going to be very similar to the time when Russell Wilson was most successful as a quarterback in the NFL, and that was when he had Marshawn Lynch, the Seahawks running game, and of course the Legion of Boom defense. And with the defense that we've been talking about all week as being a real potential to be not just top 5 but truly elite in the NFL, I think all the pieces are there for Russell Wilson to be the guy that helps end that playoff drought. And I do think that that's something that Todd strikes there, that I think that people do overlook about the potential of Russell Wilson. He's not going to be the guy that carries them to the playoffs. He's not going to be by himself, but the Steelers need a quarterback who's going to deliver in the playoffs, even in the just as simple as being a role player who just does what's needed within a specific play. He's not going to be the guy that creates. He's not going to be the straw that stirs the drink, but he's going to be the conductor that keeps everything on the straight path while the team that you're hoping is performing very well on defense, is performing very, very well in the trenches on the offensive line. And if you have George Pickens take a step forward, Pat Freiermuth take a step forward, maybe a Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson take a step forward, and then all of a sudden you got things cracking, and Russell Wilson's part of a moving train that's already going, and he's making the right decisions. That's where I think Russell Wilson could be a difference maker. We'll get to that and more questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's what keeps your ride going. And truly, it's about your ride or die vehicle, the vehicle that you're always depending on. And that's where eBay Motors is here to help make sure that you're always on the road. When you go to eBay Motors, you're going to see so many parts available to you at all parts of the year, whether you need it for your sedan, your SUV, whatever you need. It's going to help you find the right part in the right place at the right time. They have over 122 million parts and an eBay guaranteed fit, where it guarantees that your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need, the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. We're also brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you need to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. At LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue taking your questions here, and we got a lot of questions that we've saved up about Russell Wilson specifically, but this one's also about Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith and how they work together. Here's Bryce from Forest Hills out here in Pittsburgh.
Hey, Chris. This is Bryce from Forest Hills. Love the show. I was wondering, since Russell Wilson is not known to be someone who throws over the middle, if you believe Arthur Smith will actually find a way to get him to do so, and if not, what the consequences will be. Thanks so much, and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Bryce, for your question. As always, call in like Bryce did at 412-223-6644. We'll get your question by if you leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute. Bryce, let's get into a few things here. So even just last year, it's not that Russell Wilson can't throw over the middle. It's just that that's not exactly something that is the most opportune situation for a person of his build. Remember, Russell Wilson is a shorter quarterback. He's 5'11", literally like my height. You want often quarterbacks to be in the 6'3" and above range, even 6'2" and above to help them see over offensive linemen. And so that's something that Russell Wilson's kind of had to work around. And when you can't see over the offensive lineman as much, and then you're trying to process the field, it makes it harder to process what's happening over the middle part of the field. Whereas when you look to the sidelines, it's easy to process that. So that plays a big role into that. But let's look at some of the numbers of Russell Wilson throwing in between the numbers last year as charted by Pro Football Focus. Within 10 yards of throwing from the line of scrimmage to the 10-yard marker, between the numbers in the middle of the field, Russell Wilson had a pass rating of 94.1, 70 of 85 passes completed for 680 yards, a touchdown and 2 interceptions. You don't like the touchdown interception ratio, but you do like the passer rating and the efficiency. And the thing is if you look down as you get further down the field in the middle of the field, none of the efficiency numbers are bad. It's 98.3 passer rating from 10 to 20 yards, and then 20 yards and beyond, it's a 99 passer rating as well there. But the thing is there's not a lot of touchdowns there. There's only one touchdown for within 10 yards, 2 touchdowns from 10 to 20 yards, and 2 touchdowns from 20 and beyond. And I think part of that is because, again, that's not his strength. Now, if you look at where his other touchdowns are thrown, for example, to the left sideline beyond 10 from 10 to 20 yards, he has 6 touchdowns to 1 interception. That's a 125 passer rating. He was not just efficient there, but he threw it at a better volume. He had 3 touchdowns on the right sideline between 10 and 20 yards. And I look at it and I think it's more of a sign of like, look, Russell Wilson isn't going to be the guy that guns it down the middle of the part of the field all the time, and that could end up being a weakness. But I think he's going to be the guy that can find the weak spots in a defense when it's time to make the smart throws. And again, I think a big part of what can open up the middle part of the field for Russell Wilson is if the running game is a major factor. If you go and you look at how oftentimes you want to you want to see the impact of play action, it does come down the middle part of the field. But the reason isn't because you're throwing into traffic. It's because you're clearing out the linebackers and the safeties, and there's just more space in the middle part of the field because someone charged up, then your tight end snuck behind them, and then there's a larger passing window for people to target there. And I think that's what people should be looking at when it comes to Russell Wilson and the potential of him going down the field. A lot of this is going to depend on play action to help open that up. I think if you go back and you look at how the Seahawks used to operate when Russell Wilson was playing well, you go back to 2015 when he threw 40 touchdowns, 30 34 touchdowns, 34 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. And again, not saying that he's going to do that for the Steelers, but in the times when he was there, he was efficient over the middle. And in fact, if you look back at that season when they were able to run the ball with Marshawn Lynch and use play action to play off of it, he got 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, almost a perfect passer rating of 157 down the middle beyond from 10 to 20 yards. Now, further down the field, it got a little bit worse. He had 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions beyond 20 yards down the middle part of the field. But you look at those in between the numbers between 10 to 20 yards. I think that, and again, this is also at this point 9 years ago. It's not saying that but I'm not looking at the age. I'm looking at the opportunity and the style of offense that he played in that year to kind of create those opportunities and the things that were there. Also, you go back and you look at the use of play action that year in the Seahawks. Russell Wilson had a passer rating coming off of that. Just lost my numbers here on that real quick, of 96.7 off of play action. Now can't determine I haven't been able to determine play action and middle of the field, but off of play action, 8 touchdowns to 1 interception, a complete, and that's another good sign of efficiency in working the field. I think a big part of if Russell Wilson's going to use the middle part of the field, because I think simple drop back quarterback play or him coming out of the shotgun, unless it's a design play where you get a slant, you get a shallow cross, a post where it's just a guy that breaks naturally open because of something else or a really good route run, Russell Wilson's going to have to be a little bit creative. But how do you also help him be with creativity? You create those spaces with play action by using a dominant run game. So to answer your question, I think Arthur Smith, a big part of what Arthur Smith's going to have to do to open the middle part of the field is to make sure that the Steelers' run game does prove to be effective, which is why he's had whole PowerPoint presentations to even the rookies when they first arrived. They said, this is going to be the emphasis. The Steelers are going to run the football. They're going to be physical. They're going to force teams to have to try to put more effort into stuffing the run and overselling themselves in doing so. And in doing that, it'll be up to then the team to then figure out, okay, we have to force them to commit to the run, and if they commit to the run at the wrong time, catch them with play action, hit them with a big play down the field, and that opens up the middle of the field for Russell Wilson. But remember, Russell Wilson is an efficiency passer, so he's a guy who's also not going to throw it down the field just to throw it down the middle part of the field. He's going to take what's there, and I think that's another really good sign of going back to both Todd and Bryce's questions, that Russell Wilson will be able to smartly handle that, because that's what he's done in his career. He's been efficient. He's understood his role in the system, and he's played his role. I think that is the bottom line to Russell Wilson. You want that efficiency number. It's just going to be about how does Arthur Smith work with Russell Wilson to make that happen and create those opportunities to throw down the middle part of the field. I want to get more on Arthur Smith here in a second. We have another question about him. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Do you ever get caught up comparing yourself to other people in the lives that you see online? You ever feel caught up in social media thinking that someone else's life just looks so perfect compared to yours? Well, chances are they're not. And they're probably not. And the best way to live your life is to focus on the things that you want. But how do you block out all the noise and just focus on yourself? Well, that's where therapy can be a great tool to help you get there. Sometimes it just takes a professional to help you refocus on what matters most. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp knows that life can be busy and stressful, so it's designed to be suitable to your schedule. So all you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue taking your questions here on this Friday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Also, I'm going to say this. Yeah, I know some people are probably wondering, why the heck hasn't Chris Carter talked about Brandon Ayuk this week? Because he demanded a trade on Wednesday. Joke's on you, or Tuesday, excuse me. Joke's on you. I recorded most of these episodes before that announcement happened this week because I was trying to take off a few days at the end of this week so I could rest up and be fully ready when we get training camp started next week with the Steelers. So, I'm not talking about that. You guys have heard my opinion on that. Don't worry about it. If there's a trade made or if there's more reasons to believe that there is a link between the Steelers and Brandon Ayuk, we'll cover that when it happens. So, but we're not talking about it. And thank goodness, because I have talked that topic up and down on this show. And again, it's not that I don't think that Brandon Ayuk would be useful to the Steelers. I just think that there's a lot of reasons why it probably won't happen because of his price tag and because of the Niners price tag in the trade. And now if the Steelers trade him for a third and he can agree to, less than $30 million a year, then that's a whole nother ball game. But those are two things I'm not sure will happen. So that's why we're not revisiting it for the 7th time on this show in the past 2 months. But let's get to our final question here. And this one comes from a person from Seattle. Richard, take it away.
Hey, Chris, this is Richard from Seattle, Washington. I just want your thoughts on this question. A lot of people are hard on Arthur Smith right now, but in Tennessee, he only had to focus on offensive coordinator. In Atlanta, he had to focus on offense and defense. Now that he has to focus on just one thing, and that's offense, what are your thoughts of that? Thank you.
So, first of all, thank you, Richard, for your question. Again, 412-223-6644. So leave your name, your where you're from, and keep your question under a minute to get your question on the show. Just like we've had 3 questions on the show: Todd, Bryce, and now Richard. Okay, Richard, I agree with you entirely, and I've made this point a few times in this show already, but I'm going to re-emphasize it soon with this segment. I think a huge part of this is the fact that Arthur Smith, when you're a head coach, you're not taking on the role of the offensive coordinator. You can have every role in designing plays for the offense and even calling plays for the offense, but you're managing so much more when it comes to player temperament, when it comes to how you want practices to be conducted, when it comes to relationships between players, when it comes to the locker room, when it comes to the defense, when it comes to personnel, when it comes to coach staffing. And then also how do you interact with your coaches? Are you a coach that, you're like Bill Belichick and you're a micromanager where you jump in and you have your hand in everything and you're doing everything? Or you like Mike Tomlin, where you delegate more and you lean on your coaches and you trust your coaches to be a bit more autonomous and handle business on their own? Those are the things that I think that Arthur Smith didn't do well. He didn't handle the overall structure of balancing the team. And I think that complicated things. But Richard, you hit on the very point that I will continue to emphasize here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, that I am not judging Arthur Smith too harshly for how things went in Atlanta, because 1, that's an organization that's often struggled, and 2, there were big changes and injuries there that changed up entirely what he was told to do with the offense. First, he was supposed to develop with Matt Ryan. Then they got rid of Matt Ryan, and they had Kyle Pitts injured all the time. And that's not to make excuses for him, but those don't change what I think is his potential as a play caller and a playbook organizer, which is what you need from your offensive coordinator. And it's what he did very well for the Tennessee Titans. And the thing that he had the Tennessee Titans do are the things that the Steelers are going to ask him to try to make happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So again, I go back to Arthur Smith, and I think that if you're wondering, why didn't Kyle Pitts become the superstar best tight end in the league like everyone said he could? Why didn't Drake London become this guy? Why didn't, Marcus Mariota or whoever the quarterback has been for the Falcons at times? Why didn't all of this just shape up if he's such a great offensive mind? Because that wasn't all about him. That wasn't all about him and his offensive scheme that led to those problems. It was a myriad of other problems that he even kind of admitted, like, hey, ego wise, yeah, it's a bit of a reset, and he welcomes that reset for what he's able to do for the Steelers this time around, and kind of get back to doing what he did for the Tennessee Titans. Again, now this is where Tomlin handles the part of managing the people, of kind of making sure everyone else is coming together and coalescing and setting the overall tone for everyone to follow. But now you have a person who can organize how the offense works, what's the emphasis, what's the message. And that's the big thing that the Steelers were missing with Matt Canada. They didn't have a message. They didn't have a direction. And those are the problems that I think led to more issues for the Steelers than people realized. Was even more so than the play structure. It was players didn't know who they were supposed to be. We were talking to Najee Harris and Pat Fryermuth and the offense Broderick Jones in November, and they were finally feeling like late November, or no, I guess it's December, when Mason Rudolph and the offense started to click. Then they were like, we finally have an identity. We know who we're supposed to be. We didn't know before, and I think that's been the problem. That's not going to happen to Arthur Smith. I think that his experience in knowing how to work it in an NFL organization is going to play a huge role. I think another thing that happened last year was when you saw, I mean, going into last season, I said that I think that the best way for the Steelers to work with Kenny Pickett was to run the football and work Broderick Jones into the offensive line, become a better running football team with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, and then build the pass game off of that. And it was very apparent in the early weeks that the preseason success that Kenny Pickett had when he was lighting it up and leading touchdown drives every time he touched the field in the preseason, I think it swayed Matt Canada into trying to make them a more passing team to use that. And I think that was a big mistake. And when you look back at it, that was kind of what played into it. The Steelers went away from the team that they were originally trying to be. And when they finally got back to it, that's when they started to have more success late in the season. The Steelers, I don't think will lose focus on that nearly as much now, because not only will you have a veteran quarterback who knows how to ride the kind of a wave of a strong running game and a strong defense that kind of is the catalyst for the wins, and the passing game adds to it in Russell Wilson, because again, that's how he played very well in Seattle. But now you'll also have an offensive coordinator who knows who's also organized those types of offenses and will know how to balance that when you have passing success and not let that deviate them from the path that they set as far as being a stronger run team that wants to dominate the line of scrimmage and still win with its defense being the leading unit. I know this is a shorter episode, but I got a lot. I've had a lot to get done. I hope that you guys have a great weekend. Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll be back next week, fully recharged, ready to go Monday, and we'll be set to go as training camp starts next week. I'll be there at Latrobe. We'll get you all your preparations, all your preview talks here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We're back on Monday with more here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. I'm Chris Carter. See you then.